I never imagined that the person I trusted most would be the reason I disappeared. It was supposed to be a simple winter drive with my son, but when the snowstorm became too dangerous, he stopped at a rest stop and told me he would be back in a few minutes. Then he drove away. I waited for him through the freezing night, believing he would return. 1 hour became 2. 2 became an entire night. And when 7 days passed without me coming home, my son finally asked the housekeeper one question. "Where is my dad?" Her answer made him realize the terrible truth he had been trying not to face. My name is Daniel, and I was 68 years old when I learned that sometimes the deepest betrayal does not come from a stranger. It comes from the person you spent your entire life protecting. That winter had been unusually harsh. The weather forecast warned of heavy snow and dangerous roads, but my son Michael insisted that we could make the trip before the storm became serious. I trusted him. That was my first mistake. Michael had been busy for weeks helping his father-in-law. His father-in-law had recently become dependent on others, and Michael had taken responsibility for looking after the man's house and his dog. I understood that. He was my son, and I was proud that he wanted to help his family. We left early that morning. For the first few hours everything seemed normal. The road was clear and the sky was gray. But as the afternoon approached, the snow began falling harder. Soon the highway looked completely different. Cars were slowing down. Trucks were pulling over. Visibility became worse with every passing minute. I told Michael that we should stop somewhere safe. He agreed. A short time later we reached a roadside rest stop. Michael parked the car and told me to stay inside while he checked the weather and made a phone call. I remember looking at the snow through the windshield. I remember thinking that we would probably spend an hour there and then continue when the roads improved. Then Michael came back to the car. His face looked worried. He told me that his father-in-law had called and there was an emergency at home. The dog needed someone immediately. I thought he was joking. I asked him if he was seriously thinking about leaving during a snowstorm because of a dog. He became defensive. He told me that I was safe at the rest stop and that he would return as soon as possible. I told him not to leave me there. I reminded him that I was not young anymore and that the storm was getting worse. He promised me he would be back. Then he drove away. I watched the red lights of his car disappear behind the wall of falling snow. At first I was angry. Then I became worried. Then I became frightened. I kept telling myself that he would return. 30 minutes passed. Then an hour. The parking lot became almost completely covered with snow. I tried calling him. No answer. I called again. The temperature kept dropping. I had a blanket in the trunk and some water inside the vehicle. I wrapped myself tightly and waited. That night was the longest night of my life. Every time I heard an engine, I thought Michael had returned. Every time headlights appeared through the snow, I looked up with hope. But none of them were him. The next morning the storm was even worse. I tried my phone again. Nothing. By the second day, I understood that I could not depend on Michael coming back quickly. I stayed near the vehicle. I kept myself warm. I conserved my phone battery. I tried to remain calm. The days became a blur. On the third day, I saw emergency workers helping stranded motorists farther down the road. I tried to get their attention. Eventually they found me. I was alive, weak and confused, but alive. They moved me to a temporary shelter and then to a hospital where doctors treated me for severe cold exposure and exhaustion. But there was one thing I kept asking. Where is my son? No one knew. Meanwhile, Michael had returned home. He had convinced himself that I would somehow find a way back. He went about his routine. He took care of his father-in-law's dog. He slept in his own bed. He waited. 1 day passed, then another. He expected me to call. I never did. By the end of the week, he finally became concerned. 7 days after leaving me at the rest stop, Michael walked into the house and saw the housekeeper. He looked around. Then he asked the question that would haunt him for the rest of his life. Where is my dad? The housekeeper stared at him. She had no idea what he was talking about. Then she said something that stopped him completely. Your father never came home. Michael stood there in silence. He asked her if I had called. She said no. He asked if I had left a message. She said no. Then she asked him the question he had been avoiding. When did you last see your father? Michael finally admitted that he had left me at the rest stop during the snowstorm. The housekeeper looked at him with disbelief. You left him there? Michael tried to explain. He said he thought I would be fine. He said he thought he would return quickly. He said he had only left because of an emergency involving the dog. But none of those words changed what had happened. He had left his elderly father alone during a dangerous snowstorm. And for 7 days he had not gone back to find him. That was when he finally understood the seriousness of his decision. He contacted the authorities. He began searching, and eventually he discovered that I had survived. When Michael finally came to see me, he did not know what to say. He stood at the hospital door looking smaller than I had ever seen him. I expected anger. I expected excuses. Instead, he started crying. He told me he was sorry. He said he would never forgive himself for what he had done. I looked at my son and remembered the little boy who used to hold my hand when he was afraid. For a moment, I wanted to tell him everything was fine. But it was not fine. Forgiveness does not erase consequences. I told him that the worst part was not the cold. It was waiting for someone you love to come back and realizing that they had chosen not to. Michael lowered his head. He finally understood that a parent can spend decades protecting a child, but one selfish decision can break years of trust in a single afternoon. After I recovered, I went home. I changed many things in my life. I stopped making excuses for people simply because I loved them. I learned that love should never require you to ignore the way someone treats you. And Michael changed too. He visited me regularly. He helped me with things he once took for granted. But our relationship was never exactly the same. Because some wounds do not disappear when someone says sorry. They become reminders. Reminders of the moment when trust was tested. Reminders of how quickly life can change. And reminders that family is not only about sharing a name. Family is about showing up when someone needs you most. That snowstorm taught me something I will never forget. People often say that blood is thicker than water, but I learned that actions are stronger than words. My son said he loved me, but for those 7 days, his actions told a different story. Thankfully, I survived the storm. But the real question was whether our relationship would survive what happened. Years later, I still remember that rest stop. I still remember watching his car disappear into the snow. But I no longer remember it only as the place where my son left me. I remember it as the place where I finally learned that my life had value even when someone else failed to value it. And when Michael eventually asked me if I could forgive him, I gave him an answer he never expected. I told him that forgiveness was possible, but trust had to be earned again, because sometimes the greatest second chance is not getting another chance to change the past. It is getting the courage to build a different future.